Has anybody ever told you to stop playing around because life isn't a game? I think those people are missing a lot of the value that you can find in playing around and how it can actually benefit your life. So today I want to talk about 3 ways playing around can actually benefit you and bring you some inspiration for doing whatever creative work you want to do with your life. So in my previous video, I talked about the difference between creating when you have something to say as opposed to wanting to be heard. Something that I struggle with when I was creating a video was thinking about the idea of playing around, because I felt like it fit somewhere between those two ideas, but I wasn't really sure where to place it. So I thought I should give it its own video. First and foremost, playing around gives you a certain freedom to express yourself. It takes away a lot of the pressure that you might feel when you're creating something or you're working towards something specific, because you know you want to be received a certain type of way. You might want to make money from it. You might put certain expectations on it has to be this good, or you want to capture things in a particular way. When you're just playing around like you did when you were a kid, I don't think a lot of us had it in mind to put these expectations on. Playing tag at the park, yeah, I think a lot of us wanted to win, but ultimately it was just about having fun and enjoying ourselves and our friends. For those of us who might have been creative kids or athletic kids, yeah, again, we might have wanted to win the game, but being able to experience playing basketball, playing soccer, whatever game you were playing with your friends meant way more to you, I mean, if you were sensible, than the score at the end of the game and running away with the imaginary win. That freedom of expression is super important for creatives, because once we start locking ourselves into these boxes, it puts a limit on how well we can create. And as we start to put a limit on how well we can create, that is where we end up with the people who have writer's block, where we have our artist block. Or you might just turn away from whatever form of creativity you've chosen because you put so much pressure on yourself to get it right, to do it in a particular way, that when you don't get to experience whatever you're doing in that moment immediately as that, it sucks a lot of the fun out of it when we put all of this pressure on ourselves and our work. That freedom that you feel when you're just kind of playing around as you're working on your creative process is that flow state that you reach when you're just in the process and you're going and you're going and you're not thinking about what's going on around you. You're not too much in your mind. You're just actively working through a process. Now, I've heard a bunch of writers say that that's not necessarily good when you are writing from a flow state. But in my experience, I think it's really beneficial on your initial draft to write in that flow state when you're just playing around, trying new things, and then you refine your process later. One of my favorite and most hated quotes is writing is rewriting. And I used to really hate it because I didn't like the idea of going back and being very mechanical and methodical when I'm doing my work. But I've recognized the beauty of it in allowing me to refine myself so I can come out with the best possible quality. Now, it is really, really fun when you don't have to worry about getting the perfect syntax, making sure your grammar and your tenses are exactly right, and you're just getting that story that you have in your spirit down on the page. But when you're putting it out for other people, you have to refine your process because you have to be able to connect to them what your actual vision is and not what you think it is. When you are playing around, you are still finding time to practice. Play does not necessarily mean you are not practicing. Some of my favorite videos are watching Luka Doncic pregame doing some of these crazy trick shots, or the Kansas City Chiefs Patrick Mahomes practicing these ridiculous plays where they're running in circles or they're having different people throw the football in practice. Terrace Martin is a jazz musician out of LA. He talks about these jam sessions that he has with other musicians where they'll just come together, they'll play for hours and hours. And during that process, even though they're just playing around, they are still practicing. They're refining their chords. They're getting their progressions together. They're finding new melodies. And all of those things go back into their craft. It goes back into the performance that they'll have later on. Back to my previous point, when you're writing, you might just be playing around in your initial draft, just getting the ideas out. But once you get those ideas out, you're able to come back and refine them later. Once you are in a place, that flow state that I talked about before, where you can freely just express and put things down, you can work with that a lot more than all of these ideas you just have stuck in your mind. A lot of us want to keep planning and plotting meticulously in our brains, and we think we're not going to do anything until we have the perfect situation and the perfect idea. But the most perfect idea in your mind is still not as good as the worst idea that you have down in the real world, because you can actually fix that idea that you have materialized. That idea in your mind still has its flaws. You just might not be able to recognize them. And it's not until you start playing around with it and tinkering do you get that product that you're actually looking for. While you're in the process of playing, that still counts as those practice shots that you get before the big game. And I encourage everybody to take some time to just play around a little bit. The more you put up those practice shots, the more you work on your chord progressions and your riffs, and you sit in front of that computer typing away, just wondering what crazy character or weird situation you can put into your story, put into your music. You are developing skills that will eventually be the reason you're much better than you were before later on. And last but not least, when you are playing around, you're learning. Even though you might not be taking it as serious as some people who are really locked in and who might be already in a different form of their flow state where they're in the process of refining and really connecting the dots, you're still learning new ways. So when you're playing around, you give yourself the freedom to learn without the pressure of getting it right. A lot of times I hear people talk about, I'm a bad test taker. I used to be a teacher, so I heard this a lot. I'm not a bad student. I'm just a bad test taker. The test is, in a lot of ways, the bar for what you actually know. And some people feel so much pressure on getting things right so they won't be perceived as stupid, so they won't feel like I'm failing and I'm going to stay behind, that they end up getting things wrong that they absolutely 1000% know. All of the people who have ever walked into an exam, studied all night, and had been totally ready, but as soon as they wrote their name on a page, they forgot everything. While you're in the process of playing around, don't give yourself any unnecessary tests. Life, your environment, and other people are going to come with more than enough to challenge you and make you want to step your craft up. While you're playing, you are still learning. And when you're really in that flow state of just enjoying what you do, you end up with this sense of discovery and wonder that I don't think you get when you have all of the pressure of getting things right. Something I've recognized with my own work, when I'm really locked in and enjoying the process of what I do, I become a lot more open to understanding and going in different directions. So in my book, there is a lot of talk about filming and a person working on its own film project. Now, me personally, I've never filmed a movie before. Even doing YouTube is like a new process of learning how to film for me. But while I was in the process of writing the book, it pushed me to learn a lot more about films. I started Googling cameras. I started to look up the process of pre-production, post-production. I started to look at how people actually put out different works. That's something that came to me just from playing around and writing a story that I didn't even realize was going to be a book one day. I found myself developing all of these attachments to new ideas that were related to the themes in the book, but nowhere near what I thought I was going to write about. I thought I was just writing a love story. Now I know all of these processes about transcribing and black cameras, things that I've never once been interested in. That is how play can give you inspiration. Playing around has its own individual value that I think a lot of people forget as we get older and life becomes a bit more serious and a bit more routine. But when you are creative, and especially when you find yourself lacking for inspiration, lacking for direction, playing around can be really useful in helping you get over that hump. So the next time somebody tells you to stop playing around because life isn't a game, tell them you're just practicing.